Hello and welcome to the latest from Hearts Standard. My name is Joel Sked, and on this occasion I am joined by Scott McIntosh. How goes it, Scott?
Yeah, very well, Joel. Thanks.
Good. I need to apologise again, and I feel like I start every single one of these apologising to those who tune in when we're live, because always running late, and it's usually my fault. This time it was my fault. I was at the Hearts press conference today at Orion, and I got my time slightly wrong, as I was explaining to Scott off here. It started later than I thought it did, so I was rushing back. But here we are now, and as I will do over the next however many months, forget to say that this video is being sponsored by MPH Group for all your plumbing, heating, kitchen and bathroom needs. Now, we've got a couple of topics to touch on today, and we're going to look ahead to the rest of the campaign, and also just talk about players that we were wrong about, inspired by Callum Newhoff, as both James and I were certainly wrong about him after the first few games. But I may as well touch on the semi-final tickets. Won't touch on it, won't stay on it for too long, but Hearts have announced that they've got an initial allocation of 21,000 tickets, and the club had to push, trying to get my words right, put forward an extremely strong case to do so, while Aberdeen, I think they were maybe 17 with the maximum of 19,000, but I'm just double checking it. But in terms of ourselves, there's two aspects to it for me, Scott. The initial allocation, positive, but the fact that Hearts have had to make a really strong case to get that, I mean, is not great. I've heard you on the Scuffs Around the Funnel. You made a great point that just start of the season, everyone just agrees 50-50 split, and then it's up to the clubs to decide between themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there's segregation issues in the North Stand, and that tends to be where sometimes these issues sort of spring from. I think you've got to, if you're going to just look at it on a case-by-case basis, you should actually look at it case-by-case, and I don't think that's happening. So Hearts' attendance record in the League Cup is different to the Scottish Cup. Generally, we do take very good away supports through for Scottish Cup ties. I know our League Cup representation has been a little bit patchy, but apart from the Celtic semi-final in 2012, we generally do take good crowds through there. I mean, from what I've heard through the sort of jungle drums this morning, it would appear that Hearts have maybe had to agree to, pay for any unsold seats in the North Stand. I don't know if there's any sort of truth in that, but that might explain why we've been able to get that additional allocation over Aberdeen. They've maybe not been as confident in selling their allocation. But yeah, look, it's a neutral ground. I understand, and this is where I understand that if you're a Rangers or a Celtic fan, you're a season ticket holder and you get to some other games throughout the season. I appreciate that it will be frustrating to not be guaranteed a ticket for a semi-final or a final, but it's supposed to be a neutral ground. The fact that there's a Rangers and a Celtic end is embarrassing in itself. Yeah. So you've got to try and make it as neutral as you possibly can, and I think offering teams a split is the only way that you can do that. So really happy, because it sounds as if Hearts have actually made a good case for it and actually fought for it rather than just sort of accept it.
Yeah, I think you made the point about about Aberdeen and Hearts and the maybe paying for the unsold tickets, and I was speaking to Laurie Dunsire about it as well. He was messaging me when I was at the press conference, but I hadn't really read the two press releases thoroughly, and because you read Aberdeen's. The club requested the opportunity to sell up to 50% of the tickets, with any unsold tickets by an agreed date being allocated to our opponents. They said, at this point, this is once again being declined based primarily on historical ticket sales at this stage of the competition. And yeah, theirs is up for, they can sell up to 19,000 tickets. Hearts noted that one condition of this agreement is that the club covers the cost of any unsold tickets from our allocation. So it's in all of our interests to sell out and give the team the level of backing the Hearts fans are famous for. So yeah, that definitely does suggest that there's Hearts are probably more willing to do that than Aberdeen. And again, Aberdeen, terrible season. Can't really see them selling as
kick-off time as well.
Yeah, kick-off time. BBC
isn't ideal to them.
Yeah, the fact is on BBC. The Hearts, I've fully confidence that we will sell our allocation, just because it's a Scottish Cup semi-final. It is going to be a massive match, and the fact that it is a Scottish Cup game. The only thing when I clicked on it, and I don't know why I'm surprised anymore, but the cost of tickets, £40 for an adult in a lot of the sections, which is just getting too much. It's going too far the wrong way.
Yeah, I would agree. It's it's not that I've not got sympathy for anyone, especially in the current climate, but I think it's one of those things I've sort of stopped pushing back on, because I mean, when you compare our ills to the ones that people down south are facing with regards to the news about the Man United season ticket policy, Tottenham up in their season ticket prices, Chelsea and that, I think we don't get quite as rough a deal as maybe we think. But £40 still a lot, especially if you add a couple of kids in there and travel and that as well. You're talking anywhere between 100, 150 quid for the whole day. So it definitely is a lot of money to spend, but I don't think there's a lot the clubs can do about that just now under the current structure. Again, that would take a huge revamp behind the scenes for anything like that to change anytime soon.
Yeah, that's the fans coming together across the whole of Scottish football to kind of protest, and that's just not going to happen, is it? Scottish football fans are not going to get together.
I mean, you've seen after the Hibs statement at
the
start of the week, just tribalism just trumps.
Exactly.
It's just. I saw a Hibs fan today moaning about the fact that nobody's acknowledged the statement, and it's like, well, Anne Budge just made a statement about fan behaviour a couple of weeks ago. I don't think it needs to be said every week. But yeah, that'll never change. Never change.
And I understand that Hearts did ask about the ticket prices, but I think it's set by the SFA, so it's always a difficult one. And it's one of those where if Hearts ended up winning, £40 is very, very cheap to see Hearts Rangers at Hampden
That's
Park.
The thing, ask us in April whether it was worth it or not. We'll be able to give you a better answer.
Right, we'll move on to the league campaign. We've got Ross County on Saturday. I don't know if you saw any of Ross County on last night against Hibs.
Yeah, I watched the whole game.
Same. Didn't think Ross County were any good.
No, I mean, there was I'd text Laurie and Mark in that at half time, and I did comment that neither side surprised me with how they were playing. And Ross County, very indicative of Tom Cowie when he was a player. Fully endeavour, full of. I would say they're playing as a team compared to what they were under Derek Adams, but there's still a real lack of quality in there.
Yeah,
I think with Murray and Brophy, you've got willing runners who will be a nuisance, but there's not a lot going on behind there. Like the midfield, again, legs, plenty of endeavour, but zero creativity with Jan Danda on the bench. So I didn't see anything there that would worry me for Saturday. I think the only concern I've got about Hearts over the next few weeks is just about other teams maybe needing the points more, and whether subconsciously or unconsciously that has a bit of an impact on the team. I sort of made that point after the Hibs game recently, where it kind of felt as if Hibs were setting their mind about what they needed to do, whereas Hearts were a bit unsure, and I don't know whether that kind of played into the game somewhat. So that's probably the biggest challenge we'll need to sort of try and overcome over the next month or so.
Yeah, I think that's always the case. I think we've been guilty of it as a club for a number of years, where I felt like the season's petered out when it's got to March, because sometimes we've done what we've needed to do, or we've just hit a slight just hit a really bad patch and just completely dive bombed. So it would be nice to change that. And again, you look at the situation: 13 points ahead in third place, and I suppose two of the things I want to talk about was, firstly, when do you think that Hearts will wrap this up? Do you think we'll have it done by the split? And secondly, what do you think the points target, not the points target, but what do you think the realistic points total will be come the end of the season?
Yes, I do think, first of all, I do think we'll have it wrapped up by the split itself. If you look at the fixtures that we've got, away to Ross County, home to Kilmarnock and home to Livingston, I think there's a prime opportunity there to get 9 points, and that's going to be more than enough. Because not just alongside the fact that I think we can build up or sort of maintain a heady steam, I think the other teams are still capable of just really slitting each other's throats, which they've been doing all season long, and I can't see that changing either. It might change once you go into the split. There might be one or two teams that kind of manage to string a sort of runny form or results together, but can't see it happening over the next couple of weeks. So I think, a mixture of those two should see us through by then. I think points total, given where we are just now, you really should be looking for 70 as a sort of benchmark. And if you get above that, then that means we've done really well over the next few weeks. Again, this isn't a defence of the team, but I think if we do wrap up third by the time we get to the split, it'll be interesting to see how well we do in those post-split fixtures, because you could have, say, for example, 2 or 3 teams battling for fourth, and then Rangers and Celtic still battling for the title. So it's, that's going to be difficult. I think if we can get maybe 9 points or even 10 points between now and the split itself, we could maybe get up to that 70 mark with 1 or 2 results, sort of post-split, and I think that's what we should be aiming for anyway.
Yeah, and I suppose the dynamic will change if we are in the Scottish Cup final. Just the lead up to the final would be it'd be interesting to see how Naismith deals with that, with the squad rotation, with players coming back and trying to get certain players fit. Whether he will see it as an opportunity to give more minutes to Macaulay Tate, to Finlay Pollock, to maybe bring James Wilson into the fold a wee bit more. But yeah, I'm like you. I'm looking at the next 4 fixtures: away to Ross County, home to Livy, home to Kelly, away to St Mirren. Not necessarily in that order. And looking at that and thinking at least kind of 9 points would. At least 9 points is a good return. That takes us to 64 points, and then you're just looking at kind of 6 points with after the split. Again, you'll have a couple of home games in there, and our away form's been a lot better. So that's my kind of 2 targets for the rest of the season are league-wise is to hit that 70-point mark, because I think the 70-point mark for a team out with Celtic and Rangers is a fantastic return. It's like you can just a phenomenal return when you consider the history. I think in a 3-point, since it went to 3 points for a win, I think we've only hit 70-point mark once. You might correct me on that, but I think it was the 2005-2006 season. And then the other one is a game, one more away win. Again, we should be able to do it at the weekend, hopefully, and we get to 10 away wins for the season. The first time since 91-92 that would have double figures for top flight away league wins. And you do look at it, you've put yourself with that result against Celtic 2 weeks ago, put yourself in a fantastic position to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you're right. I think it's going to be interesting to see how Stephen Naismith approaches this, because I always had a bit of a feeling that the team became a little bit complacent. I think a couple of years ago when we had that cup run, I felt as if the post-split fixtures, we weren't quite sure what we were doing. We were trying, we did have players out fit, sort of unfit, and it was a little bit difficult to try and figure out what they were trying to achieve with those matches. We played up against Rangers the week before the cup final. They played a second string. We sort of, played our strongest first team, but looked as if we were going through the motions somewhat. So I think what's been quite impressive about Hearts this season has been the efficiency and the professionalism of the team. And I think that bodes well for the next few weeks. I don't think we're dealing with an erratic side where you're trying to second guess what sort of Hearts team you're going to get. I think regardless of whether we've lost or won this season, the makeup of the team and the performance of the team has been pretty similar. It's been small margins. It's either won or lost us games. So I don't think we're going to see an erratic runny form. I just think that, again, the biggest challenge is going to be, are other teams going to need it more? And that's ultimately maybe going to be what maybe swings it post-split anyway. Yeah,
massively. And I think, because I look back, and again, it was something you touched on in the discussion in the funnel this week, was the when you're talking about playing Rangers in the semi-final, they're coming in after potentially after a Europa League game, and then you brought it back to the fact that they'd just gone to the Europa League final and they played us a couple of days later, and it was us that looked like the leggy team. And I think, again, that was key players coming back and trying to get them up to fitness. The good thing about this team is that we've missed experienced players, we've missed key players, but people have stepped in and people have stood up, people have filled in. Big thing for me is take away the fitness side, take away the performance. Like you said, a very consistent performing team. I find it difficult to predict who the starting 11 is going to be, but whoever is the starting 11, whether it's a back three, back four, the style and the manner in which they approach games will be very, very similar. And I just think, just from the way Naismith has gone about his business, the way the team have transformed, like Graham in the comment says, no one could have seen this form coming after we lost to Aberdeen in December. But since then, there's been a real mentality shift, which I take great hope for when it gets to this point of the season where we've kind of wrapped up the league and you expect them to take the foot off the kind of the gas. I don't think Naismith is a type that would allow that.
No, I think you're right. And I mean, going back to that game a couple of years ago, I think we were a bit unfortunate. Yeah, Rangers were very leggy, but I think our issues were the likes of Devlin and Boyce just completely fell out the game after an hour because they were struggling for match fitness as well. And I think that was the telling sort of part of the game. We couldn't get in front during that first hour, and then we just completely fell out of it afterwards. I just can't see things like that happening over the coming weeks or the next couple of months. If we do make it to the final, I can see there being a bit of a difference in mentality. I do think that Stephen Naismith, again, he doesn't get super high or super low, and I think he sort of maintains a level, a sort of consistency in terms of how he approaches games, and I think that helps with the squad. And I think I've talked about with a few people after that Celtic game. You saw that in the Celtic match. Other Hearts teams would have got involved in the chaos of that first half, whereas we seem to want to take a step back, just keep control, and take the chances when they came, and we did that. So I think you've seen enough evidence this season, or at least over the last 3 or 4 months, to give us a lot to be positive for, especially with regards to the injury problems that Rangers have had over the last few weeks. So it is going to be a different Hearts team from the one that played back in November at Hampden, but it's also going to be a different Rangers team as well, given the challenges that they've faced.
Let's move on to the players who we have been wrong about or written off, whether good or bad. And it came to me because just kind of thinking about Callum Ewenhoff, and I remember watching him in the A-League and thinking, oh, he's going to add a lot to our midfield, and it looked like he had a lot of attributes. And then he got into the team and he was playing consistently, maybe playing a bit too much, just the way the injuries occurred. And then you're just like, it just felt so underwhelming. And I admit I'd kind of written him off. I'm just like, in message, because my mates gave me loads of stick because I put my what's left of a reputation on the line and said that he's going to be our best signing this season. He's going to transform midfield, and then it would get brought up, and then I was like, it's past me, this one. I've got it wrong. But then here we are. He's the last month or so he's turned it around. So I thought it'd be a good one to kind of look at players from kind of nostalgic purposes. Look at players who we have maybe signed and you thought they were going to be great. They turned out to be poor, or you thought that's a poor signing, turned out to be great, or even just ones who have come through the academy or have arrived and you've written off really early, but then have turned it around. Is there any when I messaged you this, was there anyone that jumped off the page for you?
Yeah, I had to sort of look at players afterwards. I came up with 2 or 3 straight away, and then I managed to get another couple of players once I was looking through the lists again. I think one of the ones, and it's not so much that I thought they were going to be bad signings, but there was 2 or 3 players that almost sort of snuck through the back door and then turned out to be really solid players for us. So I think Steve Banks is a good example of that. Someone who, when there's all that high-profile signings being made in 2005. He's brought in as a bit of a backup keeper, man of many clubs down south. So you're probably not expecting too much, but he turned out to be a really solid player for Hearts. And when he eventually got a run in the team in 2007, he had a really good season, albeit the team in general was still pretty erratic. Neil McFarlane was probably another one that comes in under that category. Someone who comes in under amateur terms because of the injury problems that he'd had before then, but actually becomes a mainstay of the midfield for best part of 3 years. So they were 2. I think the third one that probably fits under that category would probably be Andreas Velička. You know, at that point, we had players coming in from Lithuania on a sort of almost weekly or monthly basis. He also signed roughly about the same time that Panila came in. we'd only just signed Michaela about 6 months beforehand for a decent sort of transfer fee, and we still had Jankowskis and Bednar and Pospisil at the club as well. So again, came in with little fanfare, but up until Shanklin came in, you could probably say he was, probably our best penalty box striker we'd had this century. So they were the three that came to mind for that category.
Those I didn't think about Banks. The goalkeeper I thought of was Marion Kello. I didn't think there was going to be much from him just because of, get my dates right, he would have came in, like we obviously had goalkeeping issues before that have come from Lithuania, i.e. Edvardas Kurskas, and you just, or via Lithuania, because you knew they obviously through Romanov's contacts, and you're just thinking goalkeeper, you're not really sure, can be a bit hit and miss, because obviously went through Basso and Kellogg as well, Balog, sorry, Basso and Balog as well again. Shabba would have had part to play in that as well. But Marion Kello was someone who I think maybe I wasn't, and probably best indifferent about, and he turned out to be one of the best goalkeepers I think we've had in that tier below Craig Gordon.
Yeah,
over the last few decades.
Yeah, no, I would agree, and I think you're right. I think again came in well, little fanfare because we actually spent money on Ballo. We spent money to make that a permanent signing. I think it was a couple of 100,000. So I think the expectation was probably that Laszlo would stick with him. But actually, in the battle between the two, Kello sort of came out on top. So he kept that jersey for a couple of years until he had his own sort of contractual problems with Romanov. So yeah, I think he's a good shout for that, definitely. And
Vavlichka as well. I thought of him he was one. Although his goal against Osasuna, what obviously probably had me thinking, he could be a good player, but not expecting the impact he would make, considering the striking riches we had. You named them all. Ridiculous that we had so many, and no one. It was Velichka who kind of stepped up and became that clinical striker. What I realised when I was looking through all the transfers we brought in is that I am far too positive when it comes to signings. Just looking through, I was like, I thought he was going to be good. I thought he was going to be good. I hoped he was going to be good. So that was kind of my. There was very few where I'm just like straight away knowing he was going to be poor or was suspicious about. Two that came to mind were two very different players. Was Igor Rossi. Just seeing him, and I just thought he's going to be a really awkward centre back, and he just turned into a brilliant centre back, but equally a very competent left back as well. I just didn't see him becoming the player that the player that we got, and he just was perfect for Scottish football because he was just a man mountain.
Yeah, and it's another one that probably falls in that backdoor category, because I think that summer we'd made it quite clear. I think Augustine was the centre half we really wanted.
Yes,
wanted to bring into the place for Danny Wilson. And I think, as far as I can remember, Igor Rossi came in just prior to the Everton pre-season friendly. He kind of just sort of signed again, no fanfare at all. So I think that's a similar case where you're probably not expecting much, because you do get the feeling that the club had already signed their top target and he was maybe coming in as a bit of a backup option. Obviously, we were also expecting Juan Oshiniwa to come in and sort of stake a place for the left-back role, and because that didn't happen, I think Igor Rossi got more game time than anyone imagined he would either.
He was the first. He was one of the first names on my list of guys who I expected here, and then completely undelivered. I spoke to, so I got a friend who was a Hearts player at that time, came through the academy, and he was telling me about Oshiniwa, and it was him, Oshiniwa, even just in boxes, they were just doing passing drills, and everyone's like, what have we signed? And then his body fat percent was ridiculous. It was they said it was just pure muscle, and then you'd go into the gym and he couldn't lift any weights, but it was just there were even just 3 kilo, just anything overhead he just couldn't really do. It was just a very awkward person. And then Sofian El Hasnoui, I think there was a mystique that built up around him because he was injured. Again, people who played with him in training and what they saw from him were just like, nah, he's not got anything about him.
Yeah, for me, that mystique evaporated very quickly. I remember his first appearance. I think he came on as a sub at Dumbarton. I think it was a game we drew 0-0, and he played like a fives player. It was almost like that Ali Dyer sort of 40 minutes that he had for Southampton all those years ago, where he just looked like a competition winner. He just, and I still, for all the other games he played, I was like, I'm not quite sure what position he has, and I don't think Robbie's given him a free role, but he almost played like he had one. I mean, he was unfortunate with injuries, and maybe that had a huge sort of impact on him, sort of showing what he was capable of. But yeah, I think again, he was one of the first ones we brought in, I think, when Robbie and that came in. So undoubtedly, but again, fan expectation is he was clearly someone they really wanted and they wanted to get. And I think they gave him a 3-year deal as well. So I think that sort of added to the mystique somewhat. I think Oshiniwa, I remember the game that done it for me was probably when we were playing at Fir Park, and I think it was maybe around November time or December. We drew 2-2, and for what I can recall, we had to bring him off at half time because he just found it too cold. Like he literally just couldn't cope with the conditions, and I think Robbie just had enough with him by that point. So yeah, that was a strange one, but yeah, I mean, in terms of players
can you remember? Just sorry to interrupt you, but were you up in Inverness? Were you up in Inverness when he punched the boy?
The 2-0 game, yeah, the Friday night game, yeah.
We were already back in this. We went up for the weekend, but we were already back in the pub, and then just looked up at the TV, and he had flicked out to the boy. I was like, oh, I'm so glad we left.
That was a grim night. I remember that night for Sean McCurdy playing centre midfield for us that night. Speaking of players who we had sort of high hopes for, and then just fell out the picture sort of shortly afterwards. I think a couple of players that I think I get more excited about players at the start when I was younger compared to now. I seem to be a bit more reserved. So the two examples I've got are going way back to the 90s. The first one's Darren Beckford. So we'd signed him after he'd been released by Oldham, and this is for people of a certain vintage. Oldham were a Premiership side for the first 2 seasons when the Premiership started. They're not in the National Leagues like they are now. And I think the expectation was that he was going to come and he was going to score goals. He played 2 trial games prior to us giving him a short-term contract. He scored hat-tricks in both those matches. And I think the expectation was that, he could definitely add something. I think he got sent off in his first league start against Kilmarnock. Didn't really get much better after that. He scored a couple of goals in our League Cup run to the final that season at least. But by December time, we'd already signed Stefan Paye. We were signing Jim Hamilton. And I think, the management just made the decision that, Beckford could be released. I spoke to Neil Poynton a few years ago regarding it, because Neil had obviously known him from Oldham as well.
Yeah.
And I just sort of asked him what he felt was the issue, and he says it was a mindset. He says he had more enough attributes to really rip up the Scottish Premier League, but he just came up with the wrong impression of the standard of football. And
not the only one that
he just never really put in full effort to get fully fit or sort of show up well. And that's why he was only there a matter of months. So that was one of the ones I could remember being excited about at the time, being a lot younger. And I think the second one was Craig Nelson. Again, he'd been capped for the under-21s in Scotland, very highly rated when he was at Partick Thistle. I think we felt that we were getting the better end of the deal by signing him and sending Nicky Walker over to Partick Thistle. But really, I think if I could find a current goalkeeper to try and compare him to, it would probably be somebody like Dabrowski at Raith Rovers, someone who's a very good shot stopper, but is incapable of coming off his line and claiming anything. And that became very apparent very quickly with Nelson. And you could tell that his indecisiveness was having an effect on the back four in front of him. So yeah, they were the two that I felt were definitely examples of people that you can have high hopes for, but very quickly get extinguished.
I mean, the big one for me was, there's been loads over the years. Anyone that's not from the United Kingdom or Ireland, I'll get excited about, except from US players like Perry Kitchen didn't excite me, but Nearside Bislesia was just because Hibs would have had Sproul then, and I just thought Hearts missed. Back then, I was like, I was just terrified of his pace, and then you hear stories about Bislesia and how quick he is, and you're just thinking, here we go. And then that happened. One
Belgium's
cross
very flat, though. Anyone can look fast in Belgium. It's just a very flat country, isn't
yeah,
it?
of course. And then I just remember the Alloa game in the League Cup. That was the one that Michaela scored a hat. That was the one Michaela scored a hat trick in, yeah. But still,
grand match for Michaela where he got $5,000 every goal he scored.
Yeah, mental. And again, just did not look like a striker. In terms of the academy, two players that come from, before we finish up, two players that came from the academy who had two different views on them was Gary Glenn, because he came at a point where I think we were all hoping for this, like the next John Roberts, the next striker that would come through the academy and score loads of goals. He obviously started quite well, scored against Hibs, never really worked for him. And then on the flip side, Callum Patterson, I was unsure of him as a footballer when he came in. It probably didn't help that he was moved about position. He had played up front just because of circumstance. And then within a couple of years, we get back to the played a key part and get us back to the Premiership. Then in the Premiership, he emerged as a key player when he got injured and then moved. I think it was under Caffrey. We got badly injured against a midweek game against and that kind of really hampered the way we played. But I just looked at him and delighted to see how well he's gone and done, just because this is a player who clearly was professional, looked after himself, and was basically put him in a position where he could get the most from his talent.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think the Gary Glenn one's a really good one as well. I think that probably highlights just how desperate we were for anyone to come in and score goals for us during that spell.
Yeah.
You know, sort of post 2007 all the way up to about 2010, we really struggled. And I think Gary Glenn, unfortunately for him, came in at a time where the expectations were so high for the academy players as well. You know, a lot of them were getting 4 and 5 year deals through no fault of their own. It was just the sort of template or model that the club were working under at the time. So yeah, I've always got sympathy for him, because kind of it was always kind of against him somewhat, even although he did show some brief glimpses for the first few months. I think the last player I wanted to bring up was probably Marius Aliukas. You know, 2 seasons, I would say, he really struggled to win over the Hearts supporters. Not all through his own sort of merit. I think he was played between centre-half and centre-mid first season. There was a real lack of continuity in team selection under Stephen Frail, and it was only really when Shaba Laszlo came in and paired them up with Christoph Berra that we got to see a more consistent side of Marius Aliukas. So I think he's a good example of someone who definitely would have been written off by a lot of fans during the first season or two.
I mean, he was referred to as number 26 on Django's Kickback for ages and ages.
Yeah.
But again, the what didn't help was just the mood around the club and the fact that he was just seen as a extension of Romanov in the same way that Miko was at times. But yeah, he was the second Hearts player I got on the back of my shirt. It was a 06-07, and I think I just did it because just wanted to be different to all the criticism he was getting.
Just wanted to be contrary.
Yeah, exactly. Right, I appreciate that you will need to shoot off, Scott, so we will finish it there. Thanks very much, everyone, for putting the put suggestions in the comment box. We had likes of Jäger Jonsson, John McLaughlin, Rudy, just because from what he was expected to deliver, Zfuk, and I think a good shout here from the social network was Harry Cochran, and the fact that he came on the scene and everyone expected the world, and unfortunately it didn't work out for him. But until tomorrow, when James and I preview the Ross County game, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Scott, for joining me, and goodbye.